Hi, this is Jim Cunningham, and welcome to How to Prepare Financially for the Death of a Spouse. And today we're going to cover a very important topic. But first, understand something. Disclaimer: I'm a lawyer. I'm talking to you. There's no attorney-client relationship. This is just information only, and it's really important to remember that as we go through, because some of these examples might, fit for you. They might not. This is not a substitute for legal advice. I'm the managing partner of Cunningham Legal. I have over 25 years experience. We have offices throughout California. I'm a certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law, a real estate broker, and securities and insurance licensed. And I'm also a pilot, single engine land instrument rated. Our offices are kind of divided between Northern and Southern California, a little bit like Giants and Dodgers, so to speak, except Oakland, right? You have the A's in there. And we have a physical location close to many people in California. So surviving the death of a spouse, I will tell you, in practicing estate planning law for 25 years, something I have seen is people will say, well, if we both die together, or if we both die at the same time, what happens? Well, that, kind of doesn't happen. I mean, it does, but really it doesn't happen in practice. In very few times do people die really close in time together. I would say that couples in general that meet with our firm, they do a lot of things right. So when a couple comes in, they're setting up their estate plan, they're planning for retirement, they're thinking about a lot of things. But one of the things that I think is a gap is people don't put enough thought into all of the issues around outliving a spouse. Okay, so we're going to cover a lot of these, and you may not really be thinking about these issues, but for those of you who have lost a spouse, you'd be like, yeah, that stuff happens. So I would say lacking preparation is a threat to finances. And so what we're talking here, we're not talking about the emotional. We're not talking about the emotional side of losing your life partner. I mean, I meet with so many people, they've been married for 40, 50, 60 years. And they lose that person that they've shared their life with. And it's really sad. Now, sometimes it's not so sad, right? But I would say most of the time it's pretty sad. And I would also remind you that sometimes people die out of order. So we talk about this when it comes to parents and children, that sometimes the children pass away before the parents. It's happened in my own family. And sometimes people, sometimes the caregiver dies before the person is receiving the care, right? If one spouse is sick, it actually happens 60% of the time that the caregiver passes away before the person receiving the care. But dying out of order. So people might think, oh, well, the husband's going to die first and then the wife's going to survive, right? In a husband-wife marriage, that isn't always the case. So we're going to talk about a few issues, and I'm going to cover some things that we're not going to talk about, if that makes sense, and just kind of mention them in passing. Social Security, I think this is a big one to pay attention to. We'll talk quite a bit about Social Security in the time that we have here with you. Pensions, the fork in the road is, do you get a lump sum or do you get a monthly benefit? Now, if you're a public employee, sometimes you don't have that choice, or it's kind of a hybrid choice. But many people have 401ks, and that's where you contribute a certain amount of money every year. And then when you retire, you take that money with you. That would be a lump sum. So we'll compare the difference between the two. And sometimes you have an option. Okay. Sometimes you have an option, typically at a bigger company, to take a lump sum distribution or a monthly benefit. We'll talk about income taxes. I think people really don't think enough about income tax in retirement, especially as you hit RMDs on your retirement accounts at age 72. Effective remarriage. Okay, we're going to talk about that. And sometimes people choose to remarry, sometimes they don't. I think in my experience, when the wife passes away and you have a surviving husband, the husband gets married in 5 minutes, and typically wives don't get remarried as fast. So that's probably more anecdotal than anything else. We'll also talk about life insurance, how that plays into it, obviously. And then something I do want to mention is veterans benefits. So VA, through the Veterans Administration. What we see in our practice is aid and attendance, and we're not really going to cover that, just to know that that's a resource. So if you are a veteran or you're the spouse of a veteran, it's very important to pay attention to that. And also Agent Orange, it's just heartbreaking to see these sort of lasting illnesses for the men and women who served in our armed forces, and then have the after effects of Agent Orange. That's its own separate thing. But I would say those on a very high level Those are two things to really pay attention to if you are married to a veteran or a veteran yourself. Long-term care insurance, we have a whole webinar on long-term care insurance. I'm really not going to get into it here. Obviously, that plays into the finances. I would check out our YouTube page on that, as well as, can you afford to stay in California, or can you afford to move out of California? That's a whole nother issue, right? You might, if you have sell real estate or something and you don't do a 1031 exchange, but we have a whole webinar on, is the grass really greener outside of California? And we will have an upcoming webinar on retiring in California. So if you live outside of California, why you might want to consider retiring into California. So let's talk about Social Security and pensions. So I think that's probably top of mind when people think of retirement. They go, finally, I get to collect my Social Security and my pension. So when a spouse dies, a kind of a high level rule is, if two spouses are collecting Social Security checks and one spouse dies, the surviving spouse, okay, so we talk about the deceased spouse and the surviving spouse. Those are the terms that we're going to use today. The surviving spouse effectively gets the higher Social Security check. That's really what happens. Something to pay attention to with pensions, you have this fork in the road. If you're taking a monthly pension, is there a survivor benefit? If so, how much? Is it 100%? Is it 55%? Is it 50%? Is it 75%? So those are some numbers that we see. And so what that means is, if you're getting a pension of, say, $9,000 a month, and you pass away, the question is, does your spouse continue to receive that $9,000 a month benefit, or is there a partial haircut, or does it go away entirely? And you make that typically at the beginning of retirement, where you before you start getting the check, they need to know how much to pay you, right? And so what you have to do is you kind of have to figure out, is there going to be a survivor's benefit or not? And I would say that if you don't plan and a spouse passes away, has an untimely passing, okay, where it's kind of random for whatever reason, many people just have to cut back on expenses or go back to work. So it's kind of sad. So you really do need to pay attention to this. And looking at a lump sum versus a monthly benefit, I'm going to give you an example. And this is a true story. So I have changed the name. So Hugh retires, and was actually a retiree of the University of California system. This was a client who passed away. And the client elected a $9,000 a month retirement benefit. The client, Hugh, could have taken a $900,000 lump sum payout and rolled that over to an IRA. Okay. So could have taken this lump sum payment. He received 2 monthly payments of $9,000, not 10, but $9,000, and then he died. So he received 2 payments and then he died. His family got nothing. That whole $900,000 stayed with the pension fund. So I would say, in weighing these, you kind of have to think about how long you're going to live, right? So if you're going to live a longer period of time, well, that might argue in favor of taking a monthly benefit. If you think you're going to live a shorter period of time, then it might, then that might kind of weigh in favor of taking a lump sum. But this is something certainly you want to talk to a financial advisor with. Income taxes. I think people don't think enough about income taxes in retirement. I already said that, and it's true, because something that you need to bear in mind is, when your spouse passes away, if you're married filing jointly and you don't have a spouse, right? Say your spouse passes away, the following year, you're filing as a single person. Now, the difference is that your tax brackets on the same income are higher. So what that means is, if you're married filing jointly and you receive $100,000 in income versus a survivor who receives $100,000 in income, that surviving spouse will pay more tax than the married couple. So your tax bill increases when a spouse passes away. So a lot of people don't really think about that. And again, the higher tax brackets kick in at lower income levels. So let's look briefly at Social Security. I will say, on a very, this is super high level for Social Security. The reason I'm going to go through this is to let you know that getting remarried has a real effect on your benefits. So it's something you need to pay attention to and know before you get married. And then we'll talk about an alternative to marriage that does not have the same effect. So I would say there's a whole bunch of professionals out there who counsel people on Social Security. You can try and go to the Social Security website. It's kind of clunky. Good luck calling Social Security. So many of our clients actually seek out a professional, and many financial advisors are also they also have additional training in Social Security, so they can help you. They have robust software platforms. I'm just telling you, this is what I see in out there in the ether. So generally, if you remarry, okay, your benefits paid to you from your prior spouse's account stop. So if you get a divorce, now we're not talking about the death of a spouse so much as a divorce, but if you're a widow or a widower, if you remarry under the age of 60, so up to age 59, essentially the benefits from your prior spouse go away. So you would want to take a look at that before you get remarried. Let's say you lose your spouse and you want to get remarried. Pay attention to your age and pay attention to start comparing the benefits. If you remarry before age 60 and that marriage ends, you can kind of go back to your prior spouse. But if you remarry after age 60, you still may become entitled to benefits on your deceased spouse's Social Security earnings record. May. Okay, that's the operative word. And this is very complex, but the takeaway from this, from what I'm telling you, is age matters and becoming married matters. Okay, so and really the cutoff date is 60. Now in California, we have something that is kind of like a marriage for state purposes, and it has some real tangible benefits. So in California, you can become a registered domestic partner. The term registered domestic partner and spouse are interchangeable in the state of California. So what that means is if you register as a domestic partner, right, you choose to live your life together, and you're kind of like being married, but California calls it something different. It's not marriage for Social Security purposes, right? It's not marriage for VA purposes. It's not marriage for a lot of these other benefits that might be compromised if you decide to marry versus become a registered domestic partner. Now, there is a master list of registered domestic partners in the state of California, and it is limited if one person's over age 62, it does not have to be opposite or same-sex registered domestic partnership. So this was kind of a workaround with the whole Defense of Marriage Act came out, and the whole thing when prior to the time that marriage was broadened between just a man and a woman, and for men and women to become married. And so this was a workaround, but it still is a legacy. It's a legacy workaround that we still have in California. But bear in mind, if it's a man and a woman, either the man or the woman has to be over age 62, which I don't really understand why that's the case. But in California, something to understand is a registered domestic partner has the same rights and responsibilities: duty of support, community property, division of community property at dissolution of the registered domestic partnership. So it's interchangeable. And these benefits, so why would somebody become a registered domestic partner? First of all, you cannot be married to somebody else. Okay, so in that sense, that's one reason many of our clients cohabitate and don't marry, is one of them is still married to somebody else, okay, which is a whole other estate planning puzzle to work on. But the benefits of being a registered domestic partner in California: there's no reassessment of property. So if you are cohabitating and you're not married and you're not a registered domestic partner, and we have a fair number of clients who come in, they say, we've been together 30 years, marriage is just a piece of paper, blah, 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 whatever and I'm not minimizing that, but what I'm saying is there's typically a story behind that. Understand that if you inherit property from a spouse, from a non-spouse, if you inherit real estate in California from a non-spouse, your property very well may get reassessed. Now, there's some limited exceptions to that, but it's something to pay attention to. Certainly joint filing of the California California income tax, and then inheritance rights. That's a real biggie. So a registered domestic partner, again, takes the shoes, stands in the shoes essentially of a spouse, and all the rights that spouses have. And this is the right to make healthcare decisions, the right to be somebody's conservator. Those all fall under the registered domestic partnership. And Eileen asks, does person can select whom the Social Security benefit to be claimed when the person remarries after 60 years old, ex-spouse or current spouse? Eileen, I think I know what you're asking is, do you kind of pick and choose who to favor? I don't know. I think the answer is probably no. And then Colleen has an odd question. I love odd questions. Can a married couple recharacterize their union as registered domestic partners? If you're married, that's a very interesting question, because I know there were some conversions when when marriage equality came out in California, RDPs went from being an RDP and then went into marriage. I don't know the answer to that. Can you go from marriage to RDP? I don't know. You might have to get divorced. That's a really good question, probably for a family law attorney. So you can prepare for the death of a spouse on the financial side. I would say, think about this stuff, right? And I'm 52 and my parents are both living. And, you know, in your 50s, you start thinking retirement and you're thinking, well, when's this all going to kind of be, you know, do I want to keep doing this forever? I mean, this is just what people think about, right, in their 50s. I would say in their 60s, I see many clients retire right around age 60. Now, some people are lifers and they'll hold on. You know, my dad retired at age 75. It's his birthday today. He retired at age 75 and today he's 78. And he told me, he waited too long. But if you retire when you're 60, you've got some really good planning opportunities, because typically your income drops when you stop working, right? That paycheck's not coming in. You don't necessarily have that much taxable income, but you're traveling, you're having a good time, you're enjoying your retirement, you're boating, you're skiing, whatever it is. You're typically engaged in more physical activities than you would be in your 70s and 80s, and you're enjoying those early years of retirement. Well, don't ignore the financial aspect of retiring, because that may be a great opportunity to start a Roth conversion. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's actually a really good opportunity in your 60s when your income's down to do a Roth conversion. I'll explain what that is. One thing to consider is one spouse delaying receipt of the Social Security for as long as possible. And that's right around age 70. And the benefit is if you wait from your full vesting time to age 70, you get about an 8% rate of return. The last time I looked at it, the break even was about 78. So if you think you'll live past 78, it makes sense to wait until 70 to collect. But again, that's something where you want to meet with a professional and run the numbers. So Eileen asks, if the couple owns an investment property, when one person dies, will the property be reassessed? So Eileen, that's a very good question. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. If the couple, the unmarried couple, are the original owners of the property, okay, and title hasn't changed, then the property may avoid reassessment if that original owner inherits a property. For example, Hal and Wanda take title to property as joint tenants. They're an unmarried couple. Hal dies, Wanda inherits the property, no reassessment because they're original owners. But if it's anything other than that, you're likely going to be reassessed. Again, consider Roth conversions on spending down your tax deferred accounts, and I'll explain how that works in a couple of slides. And this reduces your RMDs, your required minimum distributions, when you hit 72. And I will tell you, many of my clients, they say my taxable income is significantly higher at age 72 than at any time in my life. Okay. It's because if you save a lot in your retirement accounts and they grow, you have to take a certain percentage out every year after age 72. So many people have much higher income tax, much bigger income tax issues. Colleen says, back to the registered domestic partner. California state tax can be joint filed, but not federal returns, correct? Yes, that is correct. So you joint file for California, but you're filing separately file singly with the state. That's absolutely correct. So when it comes to public or private pensions, you'll have a choice many times. Do you want a survivor benefit? Do you not? Sometimes people will take no survivor benefit because their retirement check is bigger, and buy life insurance to fund if that one spouse passes away early, and there's a surviving spouse who does not get that pension or gets a reduced pension. So sometimes life insurance is purchased. I'm not saying that that's recommended in every case, but I do see that. And we have, some pensions offer a survivor's benefit, but oftentimes that's, maybe 55%. You're getting a haircut Um, bad idea, random bad idea number 4. Let me take the bigger pension, because if I die and my wife lives, it's her problem. That's a bad idea. Okay. I kind of hear that a lot jokingly, but whenever someone jokes, it's a little bit like, maybe there's some truth there. Now, here's one thing that people, again, I think there's a mindset with many people that, oh, we're going to live together and then we'll, die kind of at the same time at some point in the future. Or at least maybe there's a fear of that, or maybe an expectation. But here's the cold, hard reality. Okay. Women live longer than men. And so if it's a man and a woman who are married, you have that issue. But when a 62-year-old man is married to a 60-year-old woman, there's a 62% probability she'll survive him and live 13 years. 13 years is a long time. There's a 38% probability that he will survive her. So it's about a little over a third and live 10 years. So what I'm getting at is there is a significant possibility that you could live 20 years or more following the death of a spouse. So when you think about higher taxes, less Social Security, maybe a haircut on the pension, you put all these factors together, and I think it really does make sense to think about it, okay, and to plan. And that's, our firm, we do estate planning. We are planners. We think about the future and we make adjustments, maybe sometimes minor adjustments. Sometimes we're not making an adjustment at all. But I think these huge range of possibilities, I think it makes it very difficult to have a concrete plan. And these probably are not comforting words to you, but I'm just kind of giving to it, telling you like I see it, is it is difficult to plan, right? Because we don't know. My brother-in-law recently passed away. In his early 60s, and that his passing was unexpected. And now his wife, who just retired, and she's going to turn 60 here pretty soon. She's got her whole, she could live another 40 years. So, if your plan says, oh, my life expectancy is this and my spouse's life expectancy is that, everyone's worried about running out of money. We actually did a webinar on this, how to not run out of money. It's on our YouTube page. But, think about more than just your projected life expectancy. You need to think of the alternative. What if I die sooner? What if she dies sooner, or he dies sooner, whoever your spouse is? So subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're watching this on YouTube, just hit the subscribe button. If you're watching this live, I really would encourage you to visit our YouTube channel. We have lots of content on there. Well, let's go through some examples. Okay. So just to give you guys a heads up, I talk about Hal and Wanda, and there's Hank and Willa. So H is husband and W is wife. Now, men are married, women are married. For these examples, I'm using Hal and Wanda just so we can kind of get it straight in our minds. Okay, so Hal and Wanda make a mistake. It's always good to see other people's mistakes, I guess, right? So they're newly retired. They're living off 2 Social Security checks, investments, and rental income from a jointly owned property that Wanda has with her mother, Mabel, Mom. You see where I'm going with this, right? So Wanda's a wife and she has a mother named Mabel. Together, they own a rental property. Now, Mabel's in her 90s and in poor health. And so Wanda just makes an assumption that she's going to outlive her mother and inherit the property. So even though Hal and Wanda are advised to review their estate plan, and for Wanda to help Mabel, because Mabel's in her 90s, she's really not paying attention to this stuff, and look at Mabel's estate plan too, to make sure that the properties are properly titled, right? So title really does matter. Like whose name is on the deed, folks, that matters. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you feel. It doesn't matter what's right and wrong. The first thing we do when somebody passes away when it comes to property is we look at title, whose name is on the bank account, whose name is on the deed. Hal and Wanda just don't see this as a priority, right? They're just having a great time. They're in their early 60s and they just say, you know what? We're going to go travel and have a great time, and we'll deal with that later. We really don't want to deal with it. But then Wanda dies from a sudden illness at age 63. Okay, so Wanda passes away at 63. Wanda's Social Security checks stop, And so does the income from the property, which is now owned entirely by Mabel, because guess what? Wanda and Mabel owned that property as joint tenants. Last woman standing gets everything. So Mabel gets the entire house. Hal's out of luck. They have no children, and they previously had income of 100,000, but Hal's income now is 72,000. So he's getting a haircut. It's not enough to keep him to stay in the house. He just can't make ends meet. So Hal ends up selling the house and moving to Tennessee, where the cost of living is lower. That happens frequently. Okay, this is not an infrequent example. Now let's look at Henry and Wilma. So another husband and wife, Henry and Wilma. Now, Henry and Wilma have too much. They kind of have the opposite problem. Well, how can you have too much money? Okay. You know, as it's been said, mo money, mo problems, right? So they're both 69, and they have, Henry has a $7 million IRA. Okay. But Henry dies unexpectedly. And so something to understand is age is highly relevant. If you take age and an IRA, or a 401k, or a 403b, or a TSA, right? Not a Roth. Your age and the dollar amount of that IRA are highly relevant when it comes to tax planning, okay? So here, I would say a $7 million IRA is a large IRA. Here's the deal. When Wilma reaches age 72, she's gonna have a $280,000 minimum distribution. Now, folks, that $280,000 is Wilma has to take it out. She moves it from the left pocket to the right pocket. She doesn't want to take it out. She has to take it out. And that's counted as income to her. Okay. She's got to take that minimum distribution. She's now a single filer. And I can tell you that 280 on top of her other income is a significant amount of money being paid to not only the federal government, but also the state of California. Right. So what does Wilma do? So Henry passes away, and Wilma meets with her A-team, right? If you've seen other videos, we have a picture of the A-team from the 80s, the lawyer, financial advisor, and accountant. And this is actually a fairly common meeting that we would have as a lawyer following the death of a spouse. And so if you've lost a spouse or you are going to lose a spouse, it's really important. You know, I hear some bad advice out there, and the advice goes something like this: don't do anything for a year. Okay, you know, don't sell the house, don't get remarried, don't give it all the way to wherever. That's probably good advice. But not visiting with your lawyer and your accountant and your financial advisor, that is probably one of the first things you should do after the funeral and after you've gone through all of the whatever memorial service you would have. Really, if you've lost a spouse, don't delay on this, okay? And we have a couple of other examples that are really time sensitive. So here, Wilma starts a Roth conversion. So what that means is Wilma has a $7 million IRA, knowing she's going to have to take out $280,000. Well, she starts moving money every year in that 3-year time period. She moves that from her taxable IRA to her Roth. Now, it's true that if she converts $1 million, she's adding $1 million to her income. But it makes sense to do these conversions before she is in her RMD phase, her required minimum distribution phase, because it's another $300,000. Now, I will tell you, there are a lot of tax planning strategies that we can use to mitigate the tax bill. So for many of our clients, we're able to not quite zero out the tax bill, but get it down really, really low. So this is, I would say, get your A-team together, and given some time, given a few tax years, Wilma can really, again, we run the numbers, but Wilma can really have a much more optimized estate plan where less money ultimately goes to the government. So that's something to be mindful of. So I will say again, when a spouse dies, the survivor may not be immediately focused on the finances. You know, most people are focused on losing the person that they've loved for decades in many cases. Okay. And I get it. It's a very difficult time. And if you're going through that, you know, I can't imagine. I've been married 30 years next year, and you know, I get it. Okay, I would say it's a huge gut punch if you don't have proper planning and mindfulness before your spouse dies. This comes as a really big shock. Now, I do want to talk about adjusted cost basis. So one thing, and which is a tax term, but Sandy has a question. If the spouses were previously married to others, have a post-nup, and each has separate trust in which their half interest in their home is placed, with title being in each of those trusts on death of the first spouse, will there be a reassessment problem? Sandy, it depends on who inherits the property. So if the property goes to anyone other than a spouse, it will likely be reassessed. If it goes to the spouse, now it can go to the spouse outright. It can go to the spouse in a Q-tip trust or a B trust. We'll talk about a B trust a little bit later. But I would say generally it's reassessed if it doesn't go to the spouse. Now, basis, if Hal and Wanda buy something for $1 and it goes up to $3, so Hal and Wanda buy something for $1, it goes up to $3 in value, Hal dies, as long as that's community property or Hal's separate property, right? That property gets an adjusted cost basis. So Wanda could sell that $3 item and not pay capital gains tax on the $2 gain. What happens when a spouse passes away in a community property state that California is, all community property gets an adjusted cost basis. So that's very important. If you have rental properties and you've depreciated those properties and they've appreciated in value, when that first spouse passes away, all those properties get an adjusted cost basis, and the survivor could, doesn't have to, but could sell those properties and not pay capital gains tax. So Eileen asks, if I pass away before my husband, I'm worried about my husband's remarriage and the new wife will eat his money. He will not have enough money to support his life. What's the better solution for this kind of situation? Well, Eileen, we have an estate planning solution for that. It's called, on a high level, remarriage protection. You can write your estate plan in a way that ensures that your spouse will not fritter away your half of the money. Okay, so the surviving spouse can always fritter away his or half of the money, but not fritter away your half of the money. So the surviving spouse also has the right to use capital losses. So this is kind of an interesting one. Hank and Wendy, that should say Wendy's Post-Mortem Tax Planning. Let's say Wendy has a $200,000 gain in her separate property Facebook stock. So Wendy bought some Facebook and Hank generated a capital loss, and then Hank dies. Wendy can sell the Facebook stock, generate a gain, and rebuy the stock back 10 minutes later. There's no wash sale rules. That's if she still likes Facebook, a little pun, pun intended. So Wendy has a gain, Hank has a loss. Wendy can sell her stock at a gain, and she can rebuy the stock 10 minutes later, and she can use Hank's loss to offset her gain. And this is if it's a separate property, thereby getting the basis higher. So again, if Hank dies on Christmas Day, Wendy's got 5 days to use, she's got 5 days to do this, otherwise she loses it. So it's very important when somebody passes away to check with your advisors. And this is getting together with the lawyer, financial advisor, CPA. Is this something that you should be doing? Now, I know you just lost your spouse, I get it, but there's also dollars and we're talking about finances. And so it's something to pay attention to. Now let's talk about Hank's death. So Hank dies. And this is something that I think, again, people don't totally realize. It takes years to measure the financial impact of a spouse's death. So Medicare bases your monthly premium on your modified income 2 years prior. So a couple can have $176,000 in income and still each pay the minimum premium of $148.50. It's your Medicare Part B, but the limit for singles is $88,000. So what this means is if Hank dies in 2018, Wendy's first tax return as a single person is in 2019. And in January of 2021, Wendy sees that her Social Security payment or her Social Security check is reduced, right? Because her Medicare premiums doubled. Okay, now it's only $150, but still there is this economic effect, right? And then it's going to take a while because she's filing single with a lower Medicare Part B income bracket. It will drop back in 2022 based on her lower 2020 income. So the idea is here that they're using her jointly filed income with Hank's additional income from his pension. But 2 years later, her premium goes up, but then it takes another slug of time for it to go back down again. So if you've lost a spouse and you've seen this weird variation in your Social Security check, that may be what's going on. So Terry asks, if an asset is held in a family trust and one of the members of the trust dies, does the adjusted basis gain waived for tax purposes? So Terry, the answer to that question is, I'll give you an example. Husband and wife put their home and investment properties and stocks into their living trust. And it is community property. Let's just assume it is community property. When one spouse dies, if it is community property, all right, then all of those assets get an adjusted cost basis. If you're in a separate property state, you only get a half adjusted cost basis typically. Donna asks if there is a cost basis adjustment on stocks, and if so, if they are sold less than a year after the first spouse's death, is that a short-term capital gain or long-term capital gain? Basis is reset as of the date of death. And the question then is, if you have a post-death gain, that's an accountant question. I don't know the answer to that question. I understand the question, but my guess, and which is always kind of dangerous to guess as a lawyer, my guess is that you would look at the total time that you've held the stock, and that clock probably doesn't reset. But if you've held the stock for 10 years, spouse dies, you get a reassess, you get an adjusted cost basis. 6 months later, you sell the property to gain. I'm assuming that would be treated as long-term capital gain because you held the property for a little more than a year. So something kind of weird with COVID relief, RMDs were suspended for a year. And so that's going to have an effect on your income. So you might see your premiums drop and then go back up again. So if you see this variation if you're receiving Medicare, Social Security, and you see this variation in your Medicare premium, that's kind of maybe what's going on. So with the COVID relief, that was enough to, let's see here. With no RMDs in Wendy's case, but her Medicare premiums would go back up in 2023. So my point in just going through all of this is, if your Part B kind of varies, it's stuff that happened 2 years ago. Okay. So just pay attention to that. And life insurance. Okay. So typically term insurance. So if you're younger, let's say you're starting out in your life and you have a baby and it's you and your spouse and you're in your 20s. Oftentimes people buy life insurance and they might buy a term policy. They might buy a 20-year term or a 30-year term. And what that means is, if you die within that term, right, assuming you keep paying your annual premium, if you die within that term, typically the spouse gets a death benefit. So they get money. That life insurance is designed to replace the earnings of this, hypothetical 20-something for the remainder of their career. And that's different. Well, one thing that you need to know, most term insurance does not pay out. Most people survive the term, right? That's why it's so cheap. Permanent insurance is something else. Now, if you hear the term permanent insurance, what that means is it's not term. Permanent insurance is typically used to pay death taxes. For our wealthier clients, it's used to mitigate income taxes. So money that you contribute to an insurance policy, as that insurance policy builds value, and then when you borrow from that policy, there's no tax on that, right? There's no tax on the increase in value of the insurance contract, and there's no tax when you borrow the money. So very wealthy people do that with, frankly, can do it with very significant assets. And then there can be a single life or a survivor's policy, or it's also called second to die. So if you have a taxable estate, you might be familiar with this. It's where, typically two spouses, people who are married, will combine their lives so that the policy pays out on the death of the surviving spouse. So when that survivor passes away, that's when the death benefit is paid. Typically, that's used to effectively pay the death taxes related to the death of the second spouse. I would say on picking a life insurance agent, something to know that there are certain life insurance companies, they'll say, oh, I'm an agent of XYZ company. Sometimes that agent is limited to selling the policies that particular company offers. And so I would think if you're doing term insurance, is it a big deal? I don't know. It just kind of affects the price on the premium. I would say that for the more sophisticated clients who are doing second to die policies, or they're doing policies for death tax planning or investment purposes, you typically go to an independent insurance agent who represents essentially all reputable companies. And the reason you do that is prices do vary, products vary, pricing varies, the health of the insurance company varies as well. So it's something that, if I'm going to plunk down a lot of money on a life policy, I would go with an independent life person. So what is the cost basis of investments to beneficiaries at the death of the surviving spouse? Harvey asks. Harvey, you're reading my mind. So AB trusts. So here's the deal. If you're married and you did your living trust before 2012, you probably have what I call a secret provision. And actually, it's not really secret. It's hidden in plain sight. It's right in front of your face, but because it's in legalese, you don't see it. Okay. So it's there. There's just got this, you as a normal person, you have a blind spot and you can't understand legalese. Okay. So here's what this is. Back in the olden days, right, for a variety of reasons before 2012, lawyers were taught by all the smart lawyers out there, all the cool kids, all the cool lawyers. Hey, if you're going to do estate planning with married people, here's what you need to do. When one spouse dies, you need to take all of their assets and put them into two piles. And the A trust is for the surviving spouse. The A trust is for the alive spouse or the above ground spouse. And the B trust is the buried spouse's money or the below ground spouse's money, right? You get this above A and B, right? And so if Hal dies and Wanda's the surviving spouse under these old school, these old fashioned living trusts, Hal's half of the money would go into a B trust. Why is it called AB? I don't know, because there's a C and a D trust, but we're not going to talk about those. So Hal's half of the money goes in a B trust. The problem is that when Wanda dies, who's the A trust person, when the survivor dies, and this answers the question, Harvey, when Wanda dies, the assets that Hal had left to this B trust do not get another adjusted cost basis. So what that means is, with this AB trust structure, sadly, we see families paying a lot more in capital gains taxes than they might otherwise have to pay. So what do you do about this? Well, if you're still married, it's really easy to get rid of a B trust. You go to a qualified lawyer, not a generalist. And I'm not going to belabor this point. Estate planning is the purview of specialists only, okay? Because a generalist typically doesn't know what they don't know. This is not a routine legal matter, okay? It's too important, it's too complex. So go to a specialist. I'm a certified specialist. California designates certified specialists. That's one way to know if you're a specialist in trust and estate law, as I am. So here, how do you modify it? Well, you go to a qualified lawyer and the lawyer says, oh, we can do something called a restatement. A restatement takes away all the terms of the trust and modifies your prior trust, right? So it replaces with new terms, and we get rid of the B trust, okay? You can't just pull pages out of the trust and tear them up. It doesn't work that way. If you've already lost your spouse and you're stuck with the B trust, unfortunately, that typically requires going to probate court. Now, I know the reason you do a trust is to stay out of probate court, but probate court has exclusive jurisdiction in California to handle trust matters, okay? So what we do is so if Hal has passed away, Wanda would come to us and say, man, I got to get rid of this B trust. It's going to be terrible. We go to court and have that eliminated. Very easy to do if someone's alive, very difficult, very expensive to do when someone's passed away. So let's go over some key takeaways. If you guys have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A. I would say the big takeaways is you may live a really long time after your spouse passes away. And I don't think people, I got to tell you personally, I don't even think about that. Because I just think, well, what would I do? I mean, it would be weird, right? We've been married so long. But that's a very distinct possibility. Now, it may not happen, but I would say, we see it a lot where one spouse will live another couple of decades. And think about, I think it's maybe a slight mindset shift. And thinking about your life, not just in tax years, because we're in 2021 and I think, okay, well, how can I minimize my tax bill for 2021 is a common question. And there's a lot that you can do. I think people need to think in longer slugs of time. Think in, halves of decades, 5-year increments, decade increments, maybe think over the next 20, 30 years and just have some thought about it. I would also say seek the appropriate experts. The financial advisor, it typically is going to have the laboring or on Roth conversions and looking at a lump sum versus pension and Social Security benefits. I would say that's kind of in the purview of the financial advisor. I will just give you a heads up when it comes to financial advisors is I have seen a bias on the financial advisors to prompt the client to do a lump sum, because then they can manage the money and then they get paid. I mean, that's just natural. And maybe a bias toward not having that monthly pension amount. Really, though, that decision is yours. That call is yours. And for a lot of people, they say the lump sum makes me nervous because I just want to get my check every month and not have to worry about it. But again, it's kind of a lifestyle decision almost as much as it is a financial decision. I would say the accountant plays a supporting role with the lawyer and financial advisor in the forecasting of taxes. Lawyers optimize your estate plan. Okay, this is really important. I put 3-year review on there. You should be looking at your estate plan. You should be looking at your estate plan every year. You should be looking at your estate plan with a lawyer every 3 years. Okay, you look at it every year, and so you look at it. What are you looking for? Well, has anyone died? Has anyone been born? Look at what your estate plan says. Who gets what? Who's in charge? Who is your successor trustee? The successor trustee is like the executor of the trust. Look at that and make sure those are still the appropriate people you want in there, because, once you become sick or pass away, many times those provisions are irrevocable. They cannot be changed. Okay. So it's really important that it reflect your current, your current intention. The 3-year review with the lawyer is primarily if the law has changed, and it does change. We're going through a series of changes here very recently. Insurance professional, you go to the insurance professional for life insurance and long-term care insurance. Sometimes the financial advisor is trained and has a skill set in insurance, and sometimes the financial advisor doesn't. So a registered investment advisor, the acronym is RIA, registered investment advisor. Many times those advisors are not insurance licensed, and sometimes they're not securities licensed. So what that means is you would have to go to a different professional, an insurance professional, someone who's licensed to sell insurance for life insurance and long-term care insurance. And then also the Veteran Services Officer. The acronym is VSO. Every county in the United States has a VSO, a Veteran Services Officer. And if you're a veteran, the VA, to say that they're helpful would be a mischaracterization if you've ever had to deal with the VA. Their mission is honorable, but your VSO is your friend, okay? And that's a local person that you can actually go talk to. And here's my DD-214, your discharge papers. And again, there are a variety of benefits. Aid and attendance basically helps you stay at home. So it's an extra payment from the government to help you stay at home if the cost of your healthcare exceeds your income and you're poor. Frankly, you have less than 130,000 in assets. And the service connected issues, and really we're seeing the Agent Orange come up. I wouldn't say weekly in our practice, but pretty frequent. Okay, and it just breaks my heart every time I see it. So there is our website. That's how you reach out to us. There's a request an appointment, the orange button there. And this is our YouTube page. So go ahead, and if you're watching this on YouTube, like our YouTube page. And in this YouTube page, you can see here, there's videos. It will automatically default you. If you just Google YouTube and Cunningham Legal, you'll see our YouTube page, and it'll default you to the home. And we have different channels, but if you go to videos, you can see our videos that are in the latest order. You can sort those by views or sort by latest order, but that's really helpful. And the feedback I'm getting from people who are our clients and they've watched the videos, they say, Jim, I've watched a lot of your videos and I've really learned a lot. I'd really encourage you to check that out. A lot of great information there. And again, we meet by Zoom, we meet in person, we meet by phone. If you're inside the United States or Canada, you can call us toll free at 866-988-3956. And if you're outside the United States, you can dial us at 1-530-269-1515. We have a fair amount of clients who are US Americans living abroad, and they need this planning too. So I will open it up for, again, subscribe to our YouTube page, and we'll open it up for some questions. Linda says, after a restatement, what does the specialist draw up? So what happens, Linda, when a client comes in and they say, Jim, I've got one of these AB trusts, I've seen your videos, help me out here. What we do is we say, if it's the Jones trust dated June 15th, 2002, we do a restatement and it's dated today's date, but we still keep the Jones dated June 15th, 2002 name of the trust. We just change all the other terms of the trust, and that's pretty much it, okay? We do the restated living trust. You typically do new wills and oftentimes new powers of attorney for property and healthcare, and a new certificate of trust and some other documents. But that's primarily what we do is the restatement. You sign your documents and then you kind of set it on the shelf and look at it every year. Anonymous asks, once a spouse dies, does the existing trust stay in place or does a new trust occur? Great question, Anonymous. So when a spouse passes away, you need to look at the terms of the trust. Sometimes a trust will say everything goes to the survivor and the survivor can do whatever they want with it. Sometimes the trust says, thou shalt divide between the A and the B trust. That's what we talked about with Hal and Wanda, is that you end up with this B trust where Hal's half of the money goes to a B trust. So I would say it depends on what the trust says. So if there are any further questions, I want to thank you for joining us here today. And I hope you found this information informative and helpful. We do have one. Upon restatement, it's a Q-tip. So Linda, so what a Q-tip trust is, that term is qualified terminable interest property trust. So it allows a spouse to leave another spouse property for that spouse's benefit with certain restrictions on it. So you can control who ultimately gets it. You can control how much your surviving spouse receives from that. That's a special type of, I would say kind of a special type of B trust, right? It's an irrevocable trust, but it has some, and is a Q-tip trust better than a B trust? Is a B trust, I don't know, it's case specific. A Q-tip trust typically requires you to file a federal estate tax return, which you would want to do now anyway because of portability, which is a whole other topic. And we talk about that on our YouTube page. All right, thank you very much. Well, thank you for joining us here today. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page. Have a great day.